This is Beyond a Reasonable Doubt with your hosts, Mark Garrigus and Adam Carolla.
Yeah, get it on. Got to get on it. Just weekend Monday. Get on. Welcome to the best 15 minutes or so in the universe. It's Beyond a Reasonable Doubt. I'm Adam Carolla. Mark Garrigus at his home office. Mark, how are you?
I'm excellent. How about you today, Adam?
Busy, but well, as per usual.
You're getting quite a bump off the Bill Maher interview. Have you noticed? I mentioned it yesterday in your plugs, but it's gotten quite a bit of traction. What do you attribute that to?
Bill Maher basically says everything I say after I say it, but no one cares when I say it. They care when he says it. So
it's the Amen choir.
Yeah, it'd be like the guy who invented the hula hoop before the hula hoop. And then he goes, what do you...
Yeah, what was it? Who was the maker of the hula hoop?
Whammo, probably, I would say. But I don't know, Bill Maher's great. Everyone sort of hangs on what Bill Maher says. And Bill Maher, he doesn't rip me off. We just sort of think the same way. And so he says a lot of the stuff that I say at some point, but I usually say it before he says it because I don't have to worry about as many pitfalls and guardrails and things. He works for HBO, so he has to be a little more calculated. But I think people people go, look, there's two guys, maybe they're on different sides of the aisle, but they come together and they have a nice civil discourse and a lot of commonality, and two guys who think for a living can have a lot of agreement on a lot of subjects. And I don't know why that is so foreign to people.
It's absolutely foreign. I noticed we had Harmeet on yesterday. In fact, I was reminded of it this morning. An Armo approached me at the gym, and I thought he was going to, say something, but who knows? Instead, he goes, "You're Mark?" And I said, "Yeah." And then he turned to me and showed me that he was watching Harmeet and you interacting from yesterday, and went on and on and on about, there it is. Exactly.
Got a picture of the Armo at the gym.
And she tweeted yesterday the same thing, that she may not agree, especially with me. I think the two of you are a little bit more simpatico on most issues, but that it was civil, it was fun, and a good conversation, which is, by the way, isn't that all you really want out of a conversation? What is the attraction of food fights? And mind you, this is coming from a guy who, early on in my TV commentating career, kind of made the career of Nancy Grace by having food fights with.
Yeah. Well, first things first, I shouldn't even said that. The point is Bill Maher, he goes over, he talks to Ben Shapiro, and they have a nice conversation. And you learn so much more about the conversation because they may differ on some points of view on certain subjects, right? So why the fuck would you learn anything if I said to somebody, I'm thinking about purchasing a car, I wouldn't want two guys that were BMW guys to talk to. I want a BMW guy, I want a Mercedes guy, and I want a Lexus guy. And I want to say to them, you tell me where I should spend my $67,000. And then they could all make a point for their side, for their brand. I don't want three guys who are Lexus guys. And somehow that's become attractive, or that's become the format for the news. Like, first things first.
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up because, as we're talking, and obviously it's a nominally legal issues related show, and the Supreme Court hearings are going on. And, the people on my side of the aisle are losing their minds about Lindsey Graham and Ted Cruz and Marsha Blackburn last night. You'd think that the left was going to have exploding head emojis. Part of what I liked about it, by the way, is when you're in a courtroom, for instance, you've got an adversarial process. Part of what I enjoy about court is that somebody who I could disagree with totally, who's basically trying to do harm to my client, at least I can have an intellectual adversarial, especially if I've got a good judge. And I kind of enjoy the hearings, as crazy as I might think some of the questions are, and as crazy as I might think some of these senators are. I enjoy the give and take and the kind of the back and forth. And after all, what is it supposed to be? Are you supposed to just sit there and compliment the person, tell them they're great? How is that advice and consent under the Constitution?
And it's scary to me that people can't even wrap their minds around it. People go, how are you still friends with Jimmy Kimmel? It's like, what do you mean we're friends? Why would I not be friends with him? Well, you hear what he talks about. I go, so what? That's a small percentage. It's not. We don't sit around and talk about politics. We never did. We try to make each other laugh. I mean, that's. And
I always say when I was growing up, the people that I really had the most fun with were the guys that I knew to be politically 180 degrees opposite of where I was. For whatever reason, it wasn't like we were talking, as you say, we were talking politics. We wanted to have a good time. We would laugh and joke and enjoy ourselves. And, if politics we disagree on, we can have a healthy discussion about that. If I think that what's happening to KBJ in the confirmation hearings is outrageous or something, that doesn't mean that I have to denigrate and then set up some wall between me and somebody who thinks it's appropriate. Why can't you have that discussion?
I think you can, and we've gone to some place where we don't think we can, and that's why when Bill Maher hangs out here for an hour and a half, everyone goes, oh, that was a nice discussion. Well, what did you think we were going to have?
Right, we're going to do some kind of verbal mud wrestling or something, and that's. And by the way, I used to complain about the food fights, and I was always in the middle of them. You could never hear anybody's position. You were screaming over each other. The producers for the cable news loved that kind of a thing, and that was what they kind of promoted. And they always wanted to get that both sidism of frickin' frack, and Nancy is the bleach blonde former prosecutor, me is the slimy criminal defense lawyer, and yell at each other over whatever the tabloid case of the day. It was kind of an exaggerated form of ESPN, if you knew what I mean. And it always reminded me, and that's why I always laugh when you talk about a Steelers fan versus an Eagles fan or something like that, because that kind of is where this comes from in a way.
Well, should we talk about Supreme Court and some of the questions?
A little bit. Yeah, the questions today were, when I watched a little bit of it, was Lindsey Graham talking about, you should have sentenced this guy for 50 years because he saw pictures on the internet and he was charged with child porn. And she was trying to explain why that isn't what, it's kind of funny because if you're somebody who wants a judge who's not an activist judge, you want somebody who's going to read the text of the statute and the Constitution. And when I say the statute, when you're a federal judge, there are statutes which govern 3553 of the United States Code, all of the sentencing rules. You're supposed to start, and the law is quite clear, although it's evolved over the years. They used to be mandatory, the guidelines. Now the guidelines are advisory, but you still start by calculating them. So she was trying to explain that. Lindsey, who knows better, by the way, Lindsey Graham was a JAG lawyer in the military. And one of the great things about being a JAG lawyer is, my father's always said that would be something that we should import into the secular world here. One day you may be a prosecutor, the next day you may be defense. So you have to understand both sides of the street. And so he knows better, but he was asking questions, and you can, with a rhetoric and an agenda, and Marsha Blackburn, the same thing, and Ted Cruz with holding up the books and critical race theory. And I saw where KBJ was excoriated. They said, "What is the definition of a woman?" And she said, "I'm not a biologist," and she got excoriated. In fact, even Harmeet, I think, said, we'll try deciding a Title VII case when you don't know what a woman is. But there is a back and forth. I mean, there is a give and take, whether you like it or not, or whether your ox is getting gored. That's what a confirmation hearing is supposed to be. It wasn't always that way. by the way. You and I are old enough to remember years ago, somebody like Elena Kagan, who was fairly recent, didn't have to go through something like this. It basically started, I think, a lot of commentators would say, started with Robert Bork and Clarence Thomas and those appointments. And now it's kind of morphed into the post-Kavanaugh era.
It became a verb, getting borked.
And borked, exactly. And guess who was doing the goring at that point, if you will?
Joe Biden, I think. Or was that Clarence Thomas?
No, I think Biden was on Thomas, and I want to say he was on Bork as well. Somebody will correct me if I'm wrong. But interestingly, and today there's a wild rumor going around. Clarence Thomas was hospitalized a couple of days ago, and the rumor that, unconfirmed, completely speculation, is that he's been put on a ventilator, which is why he's missed yet another oral argument. So God forbid, I don't wish ill on anybody's health or anything else, no matter which side of the aisle they're on. God forbid that he doesn't come back anytime soon or doesn't recover immediately. Can you imagine the fight then? Because that's going to take a 6-3 court and turn it into potentially a 5-4, which would then return it to Chief Justice Roberts' court, because he would be basically the swing vote going back and forth.
Well, I found it interesting when they asked her to define what a woman was, or male and female, or whatever that is. The part that I found interesting, first off, if you just woke up after you'd been in a coma for 10 years and you saw the dude with his hand above his hand winning the female NCAA swimming tournament, or the Supreme Court nominee being asked, "What's a woman?" You'd be going, "What the fuck is going on? What do you mean, what's a woman? What's a broom? You know what I mean? What's a spare tire? What are we doing here? I thought we were supposed to ask questions."
I want to hear your judicial philosophy. What do you think about this precedent? Is this settled law? What's a woman?
Yeah. But the scariest part of it to me is she couldn't answer. And that's kind of the scary part, because look, if she said, look, a man's a man and a woman's a woman, I don't know, ask God, it's biological. Then she would have got raked over the coals by all the fucking nut jobs who believe everyone's a woman and no one's a woman. And it's creating a situation where you're better off just not answering. You literally have to go, I don't know.
I think that's absolutely correct. I thought, the tweet that I was referencing by Harmeet, I thought was fair game, because you might have to answer that question in a specific case under federal law. What's a woman? What's a man? I mean, that at some point I could see that being the call of the case, as they say. I mean, there is a world in which that might happen. So far, though, I will give her an immense amount of credit, her being KBJ. I think she has acquitted herself extremely well. I mean, she's kind of. I mean,
I do as well. There was the one part that was a snafu, I think, with the pedophile whatever stuff, is when she referred to as the 18-year-old, and the person they were looking at was a peer, or, in the same age range, and the age was 8. I think that might have bit her a little bit, but I'm assuming she's going to sail through, right?
Look, I can't imagine she's not going to get 50 Democratic votes. I think after her performance, that she may actually garner a smattering of Republican votes. And then and if she doesn't, presumably Kamala will break the 50-50 and put her over the hump.
I think, and I've said it before, and it's just a feeling, but the Republicans are worried that someone very progressive is going to get in there, and they're going to start making law from a progressive point of view. And then the Democrats have the same fear in the other direction. You're going to get some Republican in there who's conservative, and then they're going to get rid of abortion and make assault rifles legal, and they're going to go the other direction. But I have this theory, and it always kind of feels that way. Amy Coney Barrett sort of that way is they get hit so hard. The Republicans, the conservatives get hit so hard on the way in that when they get in, they end up being more moderate about a lot of these things so as not to have people point at them and go, I knew it. I told you. I knew you were going to do this. They feel a little shamed by it. I'm not a scholar of it, but it feels that way.
There are people who have written about this, and what they have said is with Barrett and with Kavanaugh, that the process, there's especially with Kavanaugh, I've seen this written, is that the thinking is that, look, this is a guy, and, I had some experience with him some 20 some odd years ago, but this is somebody who likes to get along, who's social. He's a social animal. And once you're in that kind of DC culture, that requires some degree of moderation. The counterbalance to that is there are the people who say after what Clarence Thomas went through, that it had the opposite effect, that it kind of forced him to kind of retrench and
right. But what I'm saying is like Sotomayor is not holding back at all. She's just up there going, there's too many kids on ventilators and we've got to do something. Like, you sound like a fucking hysterical school teacher at this point, sweet. That's not measured. That's not in the middle. That's not any, meaning you don't seem to have any problem letting your freak flag fly in there, which is, but I feel like Amy Coney and some of the others do feel a little more like people are watching. People
have been, I think, somewhat surprised by Gorsuch. And he was the first of Trump's nominees. And I've said, not the first time here, but anybody who will have this discussion, he writes unbelievably clear. I may disagree with some of his positions, but at the same time, you cannot, with any kind of accuracy, except maybe on the bell curve, the middle 80%, he's got a 10% on each side that is unexpected. And some of his rules, and he's persuasive of the other justices. I bring up the kind of COVID religious secular divide. He originally was a concurring opinion. By the time he was done 6 months later, he had brought along 5 or 6 people with him to adopt his ideas. And so there's something to be said for that. And there's something to be said for somebody who's a consensus builder, especially when you're on a court where, it takes 5 votes to get something done.
Well, we will keep you guys updated and any further news. We've gone a few minutes over our allotted time, so we'll bring this baby home. I'm doing a live podcast and stand-up, Indianapolis, Indiana, Helium Comedy Club. That's coming up May 6th and 7th. And you can go to adamcroll.com because I'm doing live. My Truth Yeller is out on Daily Wire with Bill Shatner, and it's very enjoyable if you guys want to go check that out. Mark, what do you got?
I'm gonna echo that. I also saw the little promo about telling old guy jokes, and you kind of moved into Puerto Rico there, so I actually laughed pretty hard. I've got, if you're down in Palm Springs this weekend, go by Gigi's at the V Palm Springs. If you're in San Clemente, swing by Casa Tropicana. Downtown, come by 10E or Engine Company 28. And if you're in New York, go visit one of the Provas, both at Grand Central Terminal at the Moxie Hotel in Times Square.
So until next time, Adam Carolla for Mark Garriga saying mahalo.
Thanks for listening to Beyond a Reasonable Doubt. Stay tuned for more bonus episodes coming soon.